While we often think of dinosaurs as creatures that were much more intimidating and powerful than the animals of the modern day, this is not always the case. In the Mesozoic, dinosaurs existed of all shapes and sizes, from the largest sauropods to the smallest bird-like insectivores and everything in between. If we were to consider all the dinosaurs currently known to science, however, could we tell which genera would be the most and least dangerous to the average human? It's an exceedingly difficult task to accomplish with a high degree of accuracy, as we simply cannot observe these animals living and hunting in real life to determine the real answer. By studying the bones and remains of the creatures of the Mesozoic, however, we may be able to infer roughly which ones were more dangerous than others. Today, we will be doing just this, attempting to rank some of the known genera of dinosaurs into different categories, starting with the most harmless and finishing with the most dangerous. So how is this going to work? We will be generalizing, splitting the dinosaur groups up into categories that reflect their defensive and offensive capabilities, rather than homing in on the families themselves from section to section. Moreover, we will be focusing solely on the non-avian dinosaurs of the Mesozoic, and not the extinct reptiles such as the pterosaurs and ichthyosaurs that lived alongside them, as to compare the dinosaurs to one another directly and not to wider groups of animals. Finally, it's important to note that there will be a slightly higher degree of speculation involved in this video than usual, as we cannot be entirely certain of just how dangerous some of these animals were without seeing them in the flesh, which is sadly impossible. So without further ado, sit back and relax as we take you through our ranking of the least to most dangerous dinosaurs. The most harmless dinosaurs, as a generalization, were most likely the very smallest of the herbivores. Comparing these animals to their equivalents in the modern day, the rodents, logomorphs, and small ungulates, we would in life possibly see animals that are more suited to running away from an opponent, rather than standing their ground for a fight, relying heavily upon their keen senses and agility to escape such an encounter in one piece. Some of the very smallest herbivores of the Mesozoic were certain genera of basal ornithischian dinosaurs, the forerunners of much larger, armed and armored dinosaurs such as the ceratopsians and ankylosaurs. Psittacosaurus, for example, is an animal that would most likely fit into this category. This is one of the few dinosaurs that we can accurately reconstruct, thanks to the presence of pigments preserved in the dinosaur's remains. And we know that it was very well camouflaged. Psittacosaurus species hailing from China's Yixiang Formation were a muddy brown in color, adorned with shades of black and beige across its head and belly respectively, to help it blend into its surroundings and evade danger. Thought to be a particularly fast runner, capable of fleeing on two legs when it needed to, this dinosaur lacked the weaponry and defenses of its later ceratopsian relatives, armed only with a beak and small cheek spurs. Other small ornithischians that could easily fit into this category are animals such as Leolinosaura, Othnielia, Dryosaurus, and Hypsilophodon, the quick, lithe bipeds that foraged in the undergrowth for leaves and possibly small invertebrates. Some of these animals were effectively the dinosaurian equivalent of modern squirrels, long-tailed prey animals that were most likely quick to flee in the face of danger. Many of these dinosaurs were common sights in their respective environments and were well adapted to fleeing from danger with long legs and flexible bodies. They lacked the defenses of their larger relatives, with the exception of beaks and short, sharp claws that would have been more suited to foraging than fighting. Bearing in mind that this list concerns the danger that certain dinosaurs would pose to the average human, it makes sense to mention some theropods. Whilst feathered, tree-dwelling theropods such as Microraptor were dangerous to the insects and small vertebrates they preyed upon, they would have posed no threat to an adult human. Think of them as crows or ravens of their day. Most species of bird do not pose a threat to the average human, so it makes sense to assume that Microraptor, Archaeopteryx, Epidexipteryx, or even slightly larger ground-living forest dwellers such as Caudipteryx would not have been dangerous to you or I. This may have been a very different story if the animals felt in any way threatened by the presence of a human, say if they were raising chicks, but on average it is unlikely that these theropods would have been dangerous in any way. It is in this category that we start to see the first medium-sized dinosaurs come to light. We find it safe to place multiple hadrosaur genera in this category given their lack of offensive capabilities, more often than not relying on strength in numbers and their speed to run away from a potentially dangerous encounter. While larger hadrosaurs would have certainly posed a degree of danger, smaller individuals such as Tethys hadros, Aznabia, and Cicernosaurus would most likely have been quick to flee if approached by a human. Adapted for speed with their long, thin forelimbs and powerful hind legs, they could potentially deliver a kick or knock over a human with their weight. But their lifestyle and places within their respective ecosystems are indicative of animals that would much rather avoid combat where possible. Slightly larger ornithischians could also fit the bill here, with the likes of Protoceratops potentially being mostly harmless, but with the ability to deliver a painful bite with its sharp beak where necessary. Fossils have been discovered of this animal locked in battle with Velociraptor, pointing towards the idea that while this was not an animal that would actively seek out danger, it would not flee from it. Some armored dinosaurs may also fit in here, such as Nodosaurus and Polacanthus. Despite being armed to the teeth with sharp ossifications and scutes, these were only used as a means of defense, and these herbivores would have much preferred to be left alone. While they could likely throw their weight around if backed into a corner, they may not have necessarily preferred to do so given the choice. Add to this the fact that these dinosaurs were likely very slow-moving due to their heavy defensive bodies, and you don't have the most dangerous animals. Now we start to see the first dinosaurs that would almost certainly present some degree of danger to an unwary human being if confronted by one in real life. We will start by discussing the first of the predatory theropods, the dromaeosaurs. While the larger dromaeosaurs would certainly be much further down on the list, many of the small genera, such as Velociraptor, Dromaeosaurus, and perhaps the slightly larger Deinonychus, would be slightly easier to defend against given their size. It has long been the subject of debate as to whether or not the dromaeosaurs were pack hunters or soloists. And if the former were to be true, these animals would perhaps be much more deadly to a human being. In reality, while a human would be able to ultimately overpower a lone, small to medium-sized dromaeosaur, it would be hard to escape without a wound or two, likely from their slashing claws or sharp teeth. That being said, it would likely be only the larger of these genera, such as Deinonychus, that would potentially challenge a human in the first place. Another group of theropods that could be placed in this category are the ornithomimosaurs. While popular media depicts these tall, slender bird mimics as being dim-witted and duck-like, in reality they were much more akin to modern-day ratite birds, ostriches, emus, and cassowaries. These birds represent some of the most dangerous animals alive today, capable of delivering kicks that can cause lethal bleeding damage to humans when provoked. Given the size and shape of animals such as Ornithomimus and Gallimimus, they would be capable of the same. Sharp claws adorning the digits of the hind limbs could deal serious damage to an unwary human, especially if the animal felt threatened or intimidated by their presence. Prosauropod dinosaurs such as Plateosaurus of the Triassic, despite appearing early on the scene, would likely pose a threat to humans if they were to ever encounter one another. These animals were much larger than humans and were capable of rearing up on their hind limbs to reach plant matter inaccessible to other animals. The claws on their hands would have been capable of defending the animal well, and given the temperament of many modern large herbivores, it could be safe to assume that some of the larger prosauropods could be confrontational, especially in the breeding season. Many large and well-armed herbivores, such as the large ceratopsians, the stegosaurus, and the ankylosaurus, could easily be placed in this category. Given the advanced weaponry and immense size of some of these animals, combined with the fact that large herbivores in the modern day can be particularly aggressive, it is safe to assume that all of these dinosaurs would be a potential threat. A stampede of triceratops would make short work of any animal deemed to be a threat to their young, and the tail spikes of a stegosaurus, designed for defending against very large carnivores, would easily make their mark on an unwary human. Consider alongside these the weight and size of an ankylosaurus's tail club, and you have several recipes for some of the most powerful and intimidating herbivores the world has ever seen. Medium to large theropod dinosaurs would be immensely dangerous to humans, and in this category we also see the likes of Dilophosaurus, Dakotaraptor, and piscivores such as Baryonyx. While it is unknown if these animals would actively seek out and prey upon human beings in real life, we can assume that they would have boasted the temperament of modern large carnivores such as lions and tigers, and would have been readily capable of dispatching a human being if the need arose. Long, curved claws and sharp teeth would have made short work of anything they deemed a threat to their territory or young, or anything that could have made a quick meal. We have also placed some larger sauropods in this category too. While dinosaurs such as Catodocus, Nigersaurus, and Amargasaurus were not the largest of these long-necked herbivores, they were still exceedingly large animals by modern standards, who could have effortlessly shaken the threat posed to their young by a human by knocking them to the side with their weight, or delivering a powerful kick or stomp. Given the fact that nothing remotely similar to sauropod dinosaurs exists in the modern day, it is hard to compare their temperament to anything living. The closest living animal in form to a sauropod is the giraffe, who for large herbivores are friendly. That being said, they will still lash out or kick to protect themselves or their young if they feel threatened. And so an attack from an animal more than twice the size of a giraffe would be incredibly dangerous. Here we see almost all of the large theropods. Tyrannosaurus, Allosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, Giganotosaurus, Acracrocanthosaurus, and Carnotaurus amongst many others were some of the largest and most intimidating predators the world has ever seen. And while they were a lot more nuanced than simple killing machines, they would have still been highly dangerous animals in life. Not only were these animals large and carnivorous, many of them were adept hunters with extremely keen senses of smell and sight. Some were also ambush predators, dinosaurs that would have been able to silently stalk through the forests, waiting until the perfect moment to strike out at their prey. At this point, many were capable of short bursts of great speed, zeroing in on their target until they were dispatched with giant jaws or slashing claws. It is safe to say that in a face-to-face combat scenario, a human being would stand very little chance. While they were not actively hunters of large terrestrial animals, we also see it sensible to include the large Spinosaurus in with the other large theropods, given their immense size and likeness to modern crocodilians. Some of the most dangerous animals would have been the very largest of the sauropods, towering walls of muscle and flesh such as Argentinosaurus, Dreadnoughtus, Brachiosaurus, and Diplodocus. Armed with stamping, pillar-like legs, whip-like tails, and immense weight, these dinosaurs would have been able to effortlessly defend themselves against anything they deemed to be a threat, and some had no natural enemies in the wild. An animal as large as a human would likely be an insignificant challenge to a large sauropod if the dinosaur deemed them to be a threat to their herd or young. So that was a rundown of some of the major groups of dinosaurs from the least to most dangerous. This was heavily based upon speculation and opinion, and we would welcome your own personal thoughts and theories in the comments as to who the least and most dangerous dinosaurs may have been. So what do you think? Would you have changed our rankings in any way? Who do you think may have been the most dangerous dinosaur of all time?